and welcome once again to the Joe Roberts podcast. Today I will be talking about the subject of cancel culture. The title of this podcast is all about cancel culture, and I will be exploring it from a variety of different angles. In order to talk about this subject, I'm going to use one of the most recent examples of what I would consider to be cancel culture in order to illustrate the points that I'm going to be trying to make in this podcast. And one of the most recent examples of this in the UK is a television presenter called Greg Wallace, and he has had a number of allegations made against him regarding, in inverted commas, sexually inappropriate behaviour and or sexual harassment. So I'm going to be talking about this example of cancel culture because I think it does kind of present as a good example of it. So first off, I would like to point out, before I go on to say any of what I'm about to say, I would like to point out that I am not going to be debating whether he did or didn't do the things that it has been said he did. I am not going to be debating whether the allegations are all completely true and correct or not. And I'm also not going to be debating whether he does or doesn't have a problem. What I'm actually going to be debating, or rather talking about, is how effective or useful trial by media and public shaming are as regards changing human behaviour and addressing inappropriate or problem or even criminal behaviours. So what I am seeing in society as we go further and further into the 21st century is almost a descent into puritanical zealotry as regards making normal human mistakes or even making abnormal human mistakes. I am seeing our society descend into behaviours which were actually really popular many hundreds of years ago, like public shaming, only it's being done in a slightly different way. In the past, what we would do is throw food scraps at people in the street if they had engaged in some kind of wrongdoing. Now we're doing a sort of trial by media thing where a person's name and character are being assassinated in the media, and they are basically being verbally destroyed and having their career dismantled via the media. It's essentially a trial by media and a public shaming. A lot of it has been done through the newspapers, some through television news, some through social networking websites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So just to give you a bit of background as regards this guy that I'm talking about, allegations were made that he had engaged in sexualised jokes, sexually harassing comments, that he had perhaps groped and or sexually harassed women, although at this point in time none of this has been proven, that he made lewd comments, that he told dirty jokes. And we're now living in an age where something as seemingly innocuous as telling dirty jokes can actually be regarded and treated in the same way as a crime. So since these allegations have been made, it has descended into public shaming, with various women coming forward who did not say anything to him at the time, and he apparently made jokes and comments and made comments about his own sex life in front of other women, etc., etc. And a lot of these women are coming forward and talking about it through the media, not to him, but it's being done through the media. He then made an Instagram post where he observed that he considered the complaints were coming mostly from middle-class women, middle-aged women, so middle-class and middle-aged. And it seems that based on what he was observing at the time, that assessment was correct. At the point that he said that, the complaints which had been made were from middle-aged women and were from middle-class middle-aged women. However, he was absolutely crucified for saying this and has been crucified many times since via the media and on social media and in the newspapers for having said this. However, I would like to point out that at the point at which he said that, he wasn't actually saying anything that was untrue. The complaints that had been made by that point in time had been made predominantly by middle-class, middle-aged women. So it seems that we're living in an age now where actually just stating the facts or pointing out uncomfortable truths that people don't want to hear is enough to have you publicly shamed and have your name dragged through the mud. At the point at which he said it, it was a correct statement. So then some more claims were made. I'm not going to split hairs and debate how much truth there is in the claims that have been made against him, but he then went on to make what I would consider to be grovelling apology, and I also believe an insincere apology, which is an attempt at placation. However, in instances of cancel culture, these attempts at placation usually fail, and I'm sure his will as well. It's also a form of self-betrayal because he's actually backtracking on what he said and meant. He meant it. When he said this isn't right, and he basically was hinting at the fact that what was going on was probably likely to be a prelude to cancel culture, he was telling the truth, he was expressing his honest opinion, and his apology is basically an attempt at placation. It's grovelling and it's insincere. It's not a sincere apology, and it's backtracking on what he truly said and meant. And ultimately, it will not work because I have observed many cases of cancel culture in recent years, and these grovelling, insincere apologies, which are an attempt at pandering and fawning, they never work. They absolutely do not work, and they never will, because they're a form of self-betrayal. People are not going to respond well to that, whether consciously or unconsciously. This trend, which is becoming more and more of a thing, the further into the 21st century we're going, is not going anywhere remotely beneficial to humanity. We're actually moving away from things like compassion and love. And yes, I realise that what I'm saying right now is going to be an unpopular opinion, and I realise that I'm very much out of step with the prevailing orthodoxy where this is concerned, but I think somehow that's what makes what I'm saying all the more necessary. And I don't have a wide audience for this podcast. I hope one day that will change, and I hope one day people will take heed of what I'm saying in this. When people make mistakes, even up to and including criminal mistakes, I believe that the correct approach in addressing what those people have done is compassion. I believe that the correct approach is for that person to be compassionate with themselves, and I believe that the correct approach is for others to be compassionate with them as well, and to understand that all of the things that people do come from a place of good intention, and they also deserve to be forgiven. And when people make mistakes, there is only one way back from those mistakes, and it's self-compassion. And I do believe that compassion should be coming from other areas as well. I don't believe that the correct approach for our society is to publicly shame people who make mistakes, whether criminal or otherwise. I will extend it even up to and including criminals. Publicly shaming people achieves absolutely nothing, and it is not going anywhere remotely beneficial to humanity, because what applies to the celebrity world will inevitably trickle down into the lives of ordinary everyday people, and that exact thing is happening in our society now. And this idea of you shouldn't make mistakes, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that 10 years or 20 years previously is absolutely ridiculous, and it's not benefiting humanity. All that it's doing is sending the message to people that it's not okay to make mistakes, when in actual fact it is. It is okay to make mistakes. I'm going to split this podcast into two separate parts because I still have quite a lot to say on the subject, but before I go I would like to make one more comment about the media coverage of this. As is usually the case where cancel culture is concerned, I think that the media coverage of this has been highly one-sided and highly manipulative. If you were to listen to their narrative on it, you would think that everybody in the entire country story wants to condemn this individual, and that there's absolutely nobody whatsoever who supports him or who thinks that he has any right to a side in this story, and that's simply not the case. I know for a fact that there are people who think that there's two sides to every story and that he is being treated unfairly. So without any shadow of a doubt, the media coverage on this is highly one-sided and manipulative. That's the end of this first part of my podcast on cancel culture. I do hope that you will listen to the second part. Bye for now, and thanks for listening.